Burkina Faso's military just rewrote the rules of counterinsurgency in the Sahel, and they didn't do it with more soldiers or bigger budgets. They did it with speed, ***. For years, African counter-terror operations followed a predictable rhythm. Sweep territories, hold positions, wait for the next ambush. Insurgents always had the advantage. They chose when to strike, where to fade, and how long to wait. The state was reactive, slow, predictable. Ibrahim Traoré's Burkina Faso decided that wasn't good enough. So they stopped trying to control space and started controlling time. This is the doctrinal revolution quietly unfolding across the alliance of Sahel states. Under Traoré's command, AES security forces have abandoned territorial dominance as the primary metric of success. They're not trying to hold villages indefinitely or plant flags in every forest. They're trying to move faster than the enemy can think. Because in asymmetric warfare, hesitation is fatal, and tempo is everything. Here's how it works. Traditional counterinsurgency is built on presence. Bases, checkpoints, patrols that slowly clear areas and dig in. The problem is insurgents don't fight that way. They hit soft targets, dissolve into civilian networks, and re-emerge when momentum shifts. By the time reinforcements arrive, they're already gone. The state spends resources securing ground, while militants control the initiative. Traoré's forces flipped that logic. Instead of reacting to attacks, they started racing them. Operations are now structured around minutes, not missions. Real-time drone surveillance feeds directly into mobile strike units that can deploy within moments of actionable intelligence. Chains of command have been compressed. Field commanders don't wait for approval from distant headquarters. The goal isn't to occupy territory after an engagement. It's to eliminate the threat before it fully materializes. Speed denies the enemy time to regroup, time to spread fear, time to control the narrative. It's warfare built on velocity. This isn't just tactical improvisation. It's a fundamental rethinking of what victory looks like in a regular conflict. Most African militaries still measure success in body counts or kilometers secured. Traoré's doctrine measures it in response time and decision cycles. How fast can intelligence move from a drone operator to a strike team? How quickly can a unit reposition after contact? Can security forces act faster than panic spreads through a targeted community? These are the new benchmarks, and they matter because in asymmetric war, psychological momentum often decides outcomes more than firepower. The model depends on decentralization. Small, mobile units operate semi-autonomously, empowered to act on real-time information without waiting for centralized approval. This is a dramatic departure from the rigid hierarchical structures that have defined Sahelian militaries for decades. It requires trust in junior officers, investment in communications infrastructure, and a willingness to accept tactical risk in exchange for strategic speed. It also requires a different kind of soldier, one trained to think, adapt, and move, not just follow orders. What makes this shift significant isn't just its operational logic. It's the context. Burkina Faso is under siege. Jihadist violence has displaced over 2 million people. Entire regions remain ungoverned. The state's legitimacy hinges on its ability to protect civilians. And protection in this environment isn't about permanent garrisons. It's about response. Can the military arrive before the massacre? Can it intercept the convoy before the ambush? Can it act faster than fear itself? Traoré is betting that it can. And if this doctrine proves effective, it won't stay confined to Burkina Faso. Mali and Niger are watching closely. The AES military integration means tactics, training, and technology are increasingly shared. A doctrinal shift in one state could ripple across the alliance, reshaping how the Sahel fights its longest war. The question isn't whether this approach is bold. It is. The question is whether speed alone can substitute for state capacity, whether tempo can replace territory, and whether a military can sustain this pace without burning out. Because wars aren't won in minutes, but battles are. And right now in the Sahel, battles are all that matter. Burkina Faso's military isn't hunting jihadists anymore. They're hunting the infrastructure that keeps jihadists alive. ***. For over a decade, Sahelian counterinsurgency has been an endless cycle of search and destroy. Kill a cell leader, another rises. Clear a village, insurgents return. The problem was never just the fighters, it was the system beneath them. The fuel smuggling routes that power their motorcycles. The intimidation networks that silence informants. The financial nodes that funnel ransom payments and zakat taxes. These are the arteries of insurgency, and for years, no one was cutting them fast enough. Under Ibrahim Traoré, that changed. The alliance of Sahel states stopped chasing men with guns and started dismantling the machinery that makes those men effective. This is systems warfare, and it's rewriting the rules of counter-terror in West Africa. Traditional operations are designed around enemy fighters. Locate them, engage them, eliminate them. But jihadist groups don't function like conventional armies. They're decentralized networks embedded in local economies, governance vacuums, and shadow logistics. Killing militants doesn't collapse the network if the network itself remains intact. Traoré Doctrine flips the priority. AES forces now operate on rapid detect-decide strike-withdraw cycles designed not to hold ground, but to sever the links that allow insurgent control to persist. When a fuel convoy supplying an armed group is intercepted within minutes of being spotted, the entire operational capacity of that cell contracts. When a communication hub relaying kidnapping demands is destroyed in a targeted strike, coordination breaks down. When cash couriers moving extortion money are interdicted before they reach handlers, the economic model of insurgency starts to fail. The shift is profound because it changes what victory looks like. Success isn't measured in bodies or territory. It's measured in whether markets reopen, whether farmers can return to their fields, whether children go back to school. These are the actual indicators that insurgent control has been broken, not flags planted or zones declared secure. And in many areas where AES forces have applied this doctrine, daily life has resumed. Markets that were shuttered for months are functioning again. Roads once too dangerous to travel are seeing traffic. Communities are sleeping through the night. All of this without massive troop deployments or permanent military occupation. Here's why that matters. Insurgencies thrive on economies of fear. They don't need to be everywhere. They just need people to believe they could be. A single ambush on a trade route can paralyze commerce for weeks. A public execution in a village square can ensure silence for months. The threat becomes self-sustaining. But when security forces can respond in minutes, not hours, that psychological leverage collapses. If fuel stops flowing, insurgents can't mobilize. If money stops moving, they can't pay foot soldiers or buy loyalty. If intimidation networks are fractured faster than they can be rebuilt, civilian cooperation with the state becomes possible again. This approach is surgical and relentless. Drone surveillance identifies a logistics choke point. A mobile unit moves in, strikes, and withdraws before insurgents can counterattack. No prolonged engagement. No attempt to hold the area. Just disruption. Repeat this across multiple cells simultaneously, and you create cascading failures. Commanders lose contact with their units. Cells run out of supplies. Local populations, no longer under constant threat, begin sharing intelligence. The insurgency doesn't collapse all at once. It unravels, node by node. The implications stretch beyond Burkina Faso. If this model proves scalable, it offers a blueprint for Mali and Niger, both facing similar insurgent networks. It also poses a direct challenge to Western counter-terror frameworks that have dominated the Sahel for years. Those frameworks emphasize training, equipment, and large-scale operations. Traoré's forces are proving that speed, precision, and systemic targeting can achieve what overwhelming force could not. But there are risks. This doctrine depends on real-time intelligence and highly mobile units, capabilities that require investment, discipline, and technological infrastructure. It also assumes that local populations will fill the governance vacuum once insurgent control is broken. If the state cannot deliver services, security, or justice, the networks will rebuild. So the question becomes, can momentum be sustained? Can systems warfare transition into state building? Or will the same vacuums that fed the insurgency simply reopen once the pressure eases? Because speed can dismantle a network, but only governance can replace it. And in the Sahel, governance has always been the harder war to win. Ibrahim Traoré's military doctrine isn't just winning battles in Burkina Faso. It's dismantling the entire logic Western powers have used to fight wars in Africa for the past 2 decades. France spent years building forward operating bases across the Sahel. The United States invested billions in training programs, drone networks, and intelligence sharing arrangements. ECOWAS coordinated multinational stabilization forces designed to hold territory and build institutions. All of it was predicated on one core assumption: that counterinsurgency requires infrastructure, presence, and time. Traoré's Burkina Faso is proving that assumption wrong. And in doing so, it's forcing a reckoning with how influence, security, and sovereignty function in modern Africa. The Alliance of Sahel States has adopted a tempo-based warfare model that operates without the scaffolding Western security frameworks depend on. No massive foreign bases, no drawn-out stabilization missions, no dependency on external logistics chains or multinational coordination mechanisms. Instead, AES forces move fast, strike hard, and withdraw before the dust settles. They don't need permanent infrastructure because they're not trying to hold ground. They're targeting systems, disrupting networks, and collapsing insurgent capacity in cycles measured in minutes, not months. This approach is lean, mobile, and devastatingly effective. It's also incompatible with how France, the United States, and ECOWAS have structured their involvement in the region. Here's where the tension becomes undeniable. Western counter-terror doctrine is built on prolonged engagement. Train local forces, establish bases, coordinate with regional allies, gradually transfer responsibility. It's a model designed for influence as much as security, one that keeps foreign powers embedded in African military structures for years, sometimes decades. Traoré's doctrine doesn't need that. It doesn't need Barkhane-style air support or U.S. intelligence fusion centers or ECOWAS standby forces. It needs speed, autonomy, and the political will to act without waiting for external approval. That independence is strategic, but it's also ideological. By rejecting the framework, the AES is rejecting the dependence that came with it. This raises uncomfortable questions for Western policymakers. If a Sahelian military can achieve results without French bases or American drones, what justifies continued intervention? If tempo-based operations can disrupt insurgencies faster than stabilization missions, why pour resources into infrastructure-heavy models that take years to show results? The AES isn't just offering an alternative approach, it's exposing the limitations of the dominant one. And that has implications far beyond Burkina Faso. ECOWAS, in particular, is caught in an impossible position. The bloc has long positioned itself as the guarantor of regional security and democratic order. But the AES states, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, have explicitly broken with ECOWAS, formed their own defense pact, and pursued security strategies that bypass the organization entirely. If those strategies succeed, ECOWAS loses relevance. If they fail, the bloc faces pressure to intervene in states that have made clear they don't want its involvement. Either way, the regional order is fracturing. But speed-focused warfare comes with costs that can't be ignored. Rapid strike operations prioritize velocity over verification. When decision cycles are compressed to minutes, the margin for error shrinks. Civilian casualties become more likely. Accountability mechanisms struggle to keep pace. International norms around proportionality, distinction, and due process, already strained in asymmetric conflict, become harder to enforce when operations move faster than oversight can follow. Traoré's government has pushed back against these criticisms, framing them as vestiges of neo-colonial paternalism. But the ethical questions remain. Can a doctrine built on speed be reconciled with the legal and moral frameworks that govern modern warfare? Or does tempo, by its nature, outrun accountability? There's also the governance question. Dismantling insurgent networks is one thing. Building state capacity to fill the vacuum is another. Western stabilization models, for all their flaws, at least theoretically aimed at long-term institution building. The AES approach is surgical, not systemic. It can collapse insurgent control, but it doesn't inherently create the governance structures needed to prevent that control from reasserting itself. If security improves, but the state remains absent, no courts, no services, no economic opportunity, the conditions that fed the insurgency in the first place will persist. This is where the stakes become clear. Traoré's doctrine is a test case. If it works, if Burkina Faso can sustain security gains, rebuild civilian trust, and prove that African-led solutions can succeed where Western models failed, it will reshape security thinking across the continent. If it falters, the critique will be swift. That speed without governance is just another form of instability, and that rejecting external partnerships was ideological posturing, not strategic wisdom. So the question isn't whether the AES can move faster than France or ECOWAS. It's whether they can move fast enough to win the war and still slow enough to win the peace. Because in the Sahel, those have never been the same fight. In the Sahel, the side that controls time wins the war. But speed without governance doesn't build nations. It just postpones the next collapse. Ibrahim Traoré's Burkina Faso has rewritten counterinsurgency around one principle: act faster than the enemy can think. The alliance of Sahel states has turned tempo into a weapon, compressing decision cycles to minutes and dismantling insurgent networks before they can adapt. It's working. Markets are reopening. People are traveling again. Communities that lived under fear for years are sleeping through the night. But beneath the operational success lies a deeper question that no amount of speed can answer. What happens when the shooting stops and the state still isn't there? This is where the doctrine hits its limit. Rapid strike operations can collapse insurgent systems, but they can't build courts. They can sever supply lines, but they can't deliver clean water or functioning schools. Speed wins battles by denying the enemy time to regroup. But governance requires time. Time to rebuild trust, time to establish institutions, time to prove that the state is more than just a military presence that arrives, strikes, and leaves. And in Burkina Faso, that time hasn't been invested. Not yet. The risks are mounting. Intelligence-driven warfare depends on accurate, real-time information. But in a conflict where operations move faster than verification, mistakes become inevitable. A fuel convoy misidentified as insurgent logistics. A communication hub that turns out to be a civilian network. A strike authorized in seconds that kills the wrong people. These aren't hypotheticals. They're the predictable outcomes of compressing decision-making to the point where oversight can't keep pace. And every mistake erodes the very thing speed is supposed to protect: civilian trust. Then there's burnout. Tempo-based operations are relentless by design. Mobile units deploy, engage, withdraw, and redeploy in cycles that leave little room for rest or recovery. That kind of operational pace is sustainable in the short term, but wars in the Sahel aren't short. Jihadist insurgencies have persisted for over a decade, and there's no indication they're disappearing. If AES forces exhaust themselves maintaining velocity, the doctrine collapses. And if it collapses, the insurgency doesn't just return, it reclaims the psychological ground that speed denied it in the first place. But the most critical vulnerability isn't operational. It's political. Traoré's government has framed tempo-based warfare as a rejection of neo-colonial dependency and a reassertion of African sovereignty. That narrative resonates, especially in a region where French military intervention and ECOWAS coordination have failed to deliver lasting security. But sovereignty means more than the ability to act without external approval. It means the capacity to govern. And governance isn't just about security. It's about justice, services, economic opportunity, and accountability. Right now, Burkina Faso is delivering one without the others. Here's the deeper implication. Controlling time isn't just a military advantage. It's a political one. In asymmetric conflict, authority flows to whoever can restore normalcy. When insurgents control time, daily life becomes impossible. Markets close. Travel stops. Fear dictates decisions. The state becomes irrelevant because it can't protect its people in the moments that matter. Traoré AES forces have reversed that dynamic by moving faster than insurgents can exploit vulnerability. They've given people their time back, the ability to move, trade, and live without constant dread. That's not a small thing. In some areas, it's the first time in years that ordinary life has been possible. But giving people their time back is only the first step. The second is proving that the state deserves their loyalty. And that requires more than rapid operations. It requires courts that function, schools that open, roads that get repaired, corruption that gets punished. It requires a government that doesn't just strike and withdraw, but stays, listens, and builds. If that doesn't happen, the vacuum remains. And vacuums in the Sahel don't stay empty for long. This is the paradox Traoré AES doctrine has created. Speed can dismantle insurgent control, but it can't replace it with legitimate governance. Tempo can restore time to civilians, but it can't convert that time into trust unless the state uses it to deliver something beyond survival. The AES has won the tactical race. The question is whether it can win the political one. Because in the end, wars in the Sahel aren't won by whoever shoots fastest. They're won by whoever people believe will still be there tomorrow. And tempo, for all its power, doesn't answer that question. Only governance does. The clock is ticking. And this time, it's not measuring operations. It's measuring legitimacy.